We start with the first ever perfect passer rating game by Benny Friedman way back in 1933. There's no footage found from the game, so I will just show you some footage of him practicing. He completed 9 out of 10 passes for 165 yards and 3 touchdowns. He led the Brooklyn Dodgers to a 27-0 win over the Cincinnati Reds. Our next perfect game occurred 11 years later in 1944 by Chicago Bears quarterback Gene Ronzani. There is no footage for this game, so I am showing you some highlights of that 1944 season. He completed 10 out of 12 passes for 200 yards and 3 touchdowns. The final score was a 21-21 tie between the Bears and the Detroit Lions. Our third perfect game was done by NFL legend Otto Graham. Footage of older games is extremely difficult to find or sometimes non-existent, so I will show you a couple of his highlights. But don't worry, as we get into later games, all the footage will be shown. In this game, Otto Graham passed for 146 yards and 2 TDs, completing 9 out of 11 passes. He led the Browns to a 55-7 victory over the Brooklyn Dodgers. Just a few weeks later, in that same year of 1947, Otto Graham completed his second and fourth ever perfect game against the Buffalo Bills. He passed for 256 yards and 3 touchdowns, completed 13 out of 16 passes, and led the Cleveland Browns to a 28-7 victory. The year after, in 1948, Ray Mallouf completed our next perfect game. He completed 14 out of 18 passes, passing for 256 yards and 4 touchdowns. The Chicago Cardinals defeated the New York Giants 63-35 that day. This footage is from the 1948 championship game, as there was no footage for the game. In this game, Sammy Baugh completed 16 out of 20 passes. He passed for 264 yards and 4 touchdowns. He led the Washington Redskins for a 38-14 victory over the New York Bulldogs. Fast forward 5 years later, Otto Graham completes his third ever perfect game against the Chicago Cardinals. He passed for 266 yards and 3 touchdowns, completing 14 out of 18 passes, and leads the Browns to a 31-7 victory. He will become the first ever QB to have 3 perfect passer rating games and will hold this record for 70 years until it was broken in 2024. In that same season, in 1954, George Ratterman completes his perfect game against the Redskins. He led the Browns to a 62-3 victory, completing 10 out of 11 passes for 208 yards and 3 touchdowns. 4 years later, Milt Plum will complete the next perfect game for the Cleveland Browns in a 45-12 victory over the Steelers. He completed 13 out of 14 passes for 197 yards and 2 touchdowns. This will be the 5th time a Cleveland quarterback achieves the feat, most of all time. This one is an interesting one. The Cardinals actually lost this game 45-21 against the Lions. MC Reynolds was the backup quarterback who entered the game after the starting quarterback was struggling. He ended up passing for 170 yards and 2 touchdowns, but still couldn't lead the Cardinals to a victory. Len Dawson passed for 278 yards and 4 touchdowns, completed 12 out of 15 passes, and led the Kansas City Chiefs to a 59-7 win over the Denver Broncos. Fun fact, his fullback Curtis McClinton also scored a TD pass that game. Giants legend Y.A. Tittle achieved his only perfect passer rating game in 1963 against the Eagles. He completed 16 out of 20 passes for 261 yards and 3 touchdowns. The Giants won 42-14. The Browns were led to a 52-20 victory over the Giants by quarterback Frank Ryan. He completed 12 out of 13 passes for 202 yards and a total of 5 passing touchdowns. He also scored another touchdown on the ground. This will be the 6th time a Browns quarterback achieved a perfect passer rating. The year after, in 1965, the Redskins will be led by Sonny Jurgensen to a 24-20 win over the Cardinals. He completed 12 out of 14 passes for 195 yards and 3 touchdowns. Broadway Joe passed for 199 yards and 2 touchdowns in a victory over the Miami Dolphins. They won for a final score of 33-14. Just a few weeks after Namath, Johnny Unitas will achieve his perfect game as well. He defeated the Atlanta Falcons 49-7. He passed for 370 yards and 4 touchdowns. Craig Morton led the Dallas Cowboys to their first perfect game in a 38-7 victory over the Philadelphia Eagles. He threw for 261 yards and 3 touchdowns, completing 14 out of 18 passes. Fran Tarkenton scored his only perfect passer rating game during his short stint with the Giants. He threw for 5 touchdowns, 280 yards in a 35-17 win over the St. Louis Cardinals. Another perfect game set in a loss. The Oakland Raiders used 3 quarterbacks this game and suffered a 34-28 loss to the Pittsburgh Steelers. Daryle Lamonica completed 8 out of 10 passes for 172 yards and 2 touchdowns. The Falcons delivered a Week 1 stomping over the New Orleans Saints in their first meeting in 1973. Dick Shiner completed 13 passes for 227 yards and 3 touchdowns en route to a 62-7 Falcons victory. Just 4 weeks later, that same Atlanta team achieved another perfect passer rating, but with a different quarterback. This time with Bob Lee, who threw 181 yards and 2 touchdowns. The Falcons defeated the Chicago Bears 46-6. James Harris led the LA Rams to a 37-14 win over the 49ers. He completed 12 out of 15 passes for 276 yards and 3 TDs. He also had 1 rushing touchdown on that game. 2 weeks later, during that 1974 season, Ken Anderson achieved a perfect rating by scoring 3 touchdowns along with 297 yards, completing 17 out of 21 passes in a 24-14 victory over the Baltimore Colts. Our next man up is Jim Hart in 1975. He passed for 242 yards and 2 touchdowns against the Jets, won the game, and only registered 2 incompletions. We go forward 1 season to 1976, where Dan Fouts threw for more touchdowns than incompletions. He passed for 259 yards, 4 touchdowns, and only 3 incompletions. He led the San Diego Chargers over the Cardinals for a 43-24 victory. Scott Hunter is the next in line, barely winning over the New Orleans Saints 23-20. He completed 10 out of 11 passes for 138 yards and 2 touchdowns. Steve Grogan in 1978 against the division rivals New York Jets passed for 281 yards and 4 touchdowns. He led the Patriots to a 55-21 victory. Brian Sipe is our next Browns quarterback to achieve the feat. Passing for 3 touchdowns and 217 yards against the Buffalo Bills, Cleveland won 41-20. This will be the 7th time a Browns quarterback achieves a perfect rating. In 1980, Vince Evans achieved a perfect rating with the Chicago Bears against the Green Bay Packers. They stomped them 61-7. Vince passed for 316 yards and 3 TDs during the game.
It's a learning process and a good one for Evans.
Craig Morton completed his second perfect game, this time playing for the Denver Broncos in a 42-24 win over the Chargers. He passed for 4 touchdowns, 308 yards, and registered only 1 incompletion. He became the first ever quarterback to complete a perfect game for 2 different teams. The Jets passed all over the Seahawks in 1986 with a final score of 38-7. Ken O'Brien scored 4 touchdown passes, 431 yards, and completed 26 out of 32 passes that day. Joe Montana completed his first and only perfect rating game in a 45-3 demolishing victory over the Falcons. He passed for 270 yards, 3 touchdowns, and also 1 rushing touchdown. Bobby Hebert scored a perfect rating in a narrow loss for the Atlanta Falcons. They were defeated 34-31. Herbert scored 3 TDs and passed for 243 yards.
98 yards for touchdown. What happened, TJ?
Well, Robin, from 98 yards away, this is big.
Craig Erickson is the next on the list. He completed 19 out of 24 passes for 313 yards and 3 touchdowns. He is the first Tampa Bay Buccaneer to achieve the feat, and he did it on a 24-10 victory over the Colts. A couple of weeks later, Dave Krieg will achieve a perfect rating against the Bills. He led the Lions to a 35-21 win. He passed for 351 yards and 3 touchdowns.
Finding a wide open Aubrey Matthews for the 28-yard touchdown, 21.
Chris Chandler passes for 352 yards, 4 touchdowns, and completes 23 out of 26 passes, throwing more touchdowns than incompletions en route to a 38-28 Oilers victory over the Bengals. Few weeks later, the Bengals will achieve their own perfect game. Jeff Blake passes for 275 yards, 3 touchdowns, and they get the win 27-9 over the Steelers.
Gain of 12 yards. Then on 3rd and 8, from their 38.
4 years later, Kurt Warner will do the feat in 1999. He led the Rams to a 38-10 victory over the Bengals. He passed for 310 yards and 3 touchdowns. One year later, Kurt Warner achieves his second perfect game against the Chargers. They won 57-31. Warner passed for 390 yards and 4 touchdowns. Warner becomes the first passer to achieve a perfect game in the new millennium. Peyton Manning completes his first ever perfect game against the New England Patriots. Colts win 30-23. Manning completes 16 out of 20 passes for 268 yards and 3 touchdowns. In the same year, during the final game of the season, Doug Flutie led the Bills to a 42-23 victory over the Seahawks. He passed for 3 touchdowns and 366 yards, becoming the first ever Bills quarterback to achieve a perfect game. 2 years later, Peyton will complete his second perfect game in a victory against the Eagles. He completed 18 out of 23 passes for 319 yards and 3 TDs. The Colts won 35-13. In that same year, the Colts will lose against a perfect game delivered by Kerry Collins. completing 23 out of 29 passes for 366 yards and 4 touchdowns. Giants won 44-27. In 2003, Peyton Manning will tie the NFL record with 3 perfect passer rating games. He did it against the Saints en route to a 55-21 victory. He passed for 314 yards and a total of 6 passing touchdowns. In that same year, Chad Pennington will throw a perfect game in a loss against the Manning-led Colts. He completed 11 out of 14 passes for 219 yards and 3 touchdowns. Jets lost 38-31. Trent Green completed 20 out of 25 passes for 341 yards and 3 TDs. Kansas City won the game 45-17. This will mark the 3rd perfect game recorded in the year 2003. The Eagles won this game 56-21. Donovan Mcnabb threw 4 touchdowns and 381 yards. This will be the first time a Philadelphia Eagles quarterback achieves the feat.
Big game pitch. Touchdown.
Tom Brady in his magical 2007 season destroyed the Miami Dolphins on this Sunday afternoon. He scored 5 TDs in the first half, and the Patriots won 49-28. He passed for 354 yards and 6 touchdowns, completing 21 out of 25 passes. At one point during the game, we had this insane stat line from Tom. A few weeks later, Ben Roethlisberger will pass for 5 touchdowns and 209 yards against the Ravens. Steelers won 38-7. Ben only registered 3 incompletions. Ben will later do it again, defeating the Rams 41-24. This time, he passed for 261 yards and 3 TDs, completing 16 out of 20 passes.
To the end zone. Touchdown Steelers.
Kurt Warner will achieve the feat for the 3rd time with the Cardinals, passing for 361 yards and 3 touchdowns, completing 19 out of 24 passes in a 31-10 victory over the Dolphins. In 2009, Drew Brees will complete his only perfect passer rating game against the Patriots. He passed for 5 touchdowns, 371 yards in a 38-17 victory.
Able to get away. Pierre Thomas on his way.
1 year later, in 2010, Tom Brady will complete his 2nd perfect game in a 45-24 victory over the Lions. He completed 21 out of 27 passes for 341 yards and 4 touchdowns. Rookie quarterback Robert Griffin III defeated the Eagles 31-6. He threw 4 touchdowns and 200 yards. He only threw 1 incompletion, completing 14 out of 15 passes. Nick Foles threw for an NFL record 7 touchdown passes in a 49-20 victory over the Raiders. He completed 22 out of 28 passes and threw for 406 yards.
Looking in the end zone. Throws there. Touchdown Eagles. Foles is going deep sideline. Deshaun Jackson is alone for another.
Kansas City Chiefs quarterback Alex Smith completed a perfect game in a victory against the Oakland Raiders. He passed 287 yards and 5 touchdowns, threw only 3 incompletions, and won 56-31. Jamal Charles had 5 total touchdowns that game, 1 on the ground and 4 on the air. The New York Jets won over the Dolphins 37-24. In this game, Geno Smith completed 20 out of 25 passes for 358 yards and 3 touchdowns. In the opening game of the 2015 season, the first overall pick of the 2015 draft, Jameis Winston, faced off against the second overall pick, Marcus Mariota. Mariota will win the game 42-14 and achieve his only perfect game in his first NFL start. He completed 13 out of 15 passes for 209 yards and 4 touchdowns. Ryan Tannehill will do the deed for the Dolphins a few weeks later in a 44-26 win over the Texans. He threw for 4 TDs, 282 yards, and only 1 incompletion in that game. Another Redskins quarterback, this time Kirk Cousins, leads them to a perfect game and victory over the Saints. He passed for 324 yards and 4 touchdowns. Redskins will win 47-14.
11 as Cousins throws. Touchdown.
3 years later, it is Jared Goff's turn to complete the feat. He passed for 465 and 5 passing touchdowns. Kirk Cousins on the other side of the ball also passed for 400-plus yards and 3 TDs, yet was not enough to win. The Rams won the game 38-31 against the Vikings. Russell Wilson completed 14 out of 17 passes for 248 yards and 3 touchdowns. He led the Seattle Seahawks to a 28-14 victory over the Lions.
Wilson to the air on 3rd down. What a catch!
A few weeks later, Big Ben will pass for his 3rd ever perfect game, tying the NFL record set by Otto Graham. He threw 328 yards and 5 touchdowns. The Steelers won 52-21 over the Panthers. The year after, in 2019, Dak Prescott will achieve a perfect game against the Giants. He passed for 405 yards and 4 touchdowns. The Dallas Cowboys won 35-17. Lamar will achieve his first ever perfect game during his first start of his 2019 MVP season. He threw 5 touchdowns, 324 yards, and only 3 incompletions. Ravens won that game 59-10 against the Miami Dolphins. Later that year, Deshaun Watson will do the deed for the Houston Texans, completing 28 out of 33 passes for 426 yards and 5 touchdowns. The Texans defeated the Falcons 53-32. Next man up in 2019 is Aron Rodgers. He led the Packers over the Raiders en route to a 42-24 victory. He threw for 5 touchdowns and 429 yards in the game. This marks the first time Rodgers has achieved a perfect game. Lamar will post his 2nd ever perfect game a few weeks later against the Bengals. He passed for 3 touchdowns, 223 yards, and he also ran for 65 yards and 1 touchdown. He threw only 2 incompletions in this game and led the Ravens to a 49-13 destruction of the Bengals. The GOAT. Tom Brady will tie an NFL record for his 3rd ever perfect game against the Detroit Lions. He completed 22 out of 27 passes for 348 yards and 4 touchdowns. Tampa Bay dismantled the Lions 47-7, and even Brady's backup, Blaine Gabbert, threw for 2 more touchdown passes. Josh Allen led the Bills to a 48-20 victory over the Miami Dolphins. He passed for 320 yards and 4 touchdowns, completing 21 out of 25 passes. A few weeks later, now it's Brock Purdy's turn to complete a perfect game. He threw for 3 touchdowns and 333 yards. completed 21 out of 25 passes, and led the 49ers to a 27-14 victory over Tampa Bay. 1 month later, the Buccaneers had their own perfect passer in Baker Mayfield. He passed for 4 touchdowns and 381 yards in a win against the Green Bay Packers.
Mayfield looking deep. He's got Godwin with a big catch.
In Week 16, the last day of the year 2023, Lamar achieved perfection for the 3rd time. He passed for 321 yards, 5 touchdowns, and rushed for 35 yards. He only threw 3 incompletions and won the game 56-19.
Completes.
Kyler Murray became the 2nd ever Cardinals quarterback to achieve a perfect game. He did it against the Rams in a 41-10 victory. He passed for 266 yards and 3 touchdowns.
Right in front of Byron Young. He's going to launch it. Harrison's.
On November 3rd, 2024, Lamar Jackson broke Otto Graham's record that had stood for 70 years. He achieved his 4th perfect passer rating game in a win against the Denver Broncos. Lamar passed for 280 yards, 3 touchdowns, and completed 16 out of 19 passes. The final score was Ravens 41, Broncos 10. The latest perfect game happened in Week 10 of this past 2024 season. The Detroit Lions demolished the Jaguars 52-6. Jared Goff was the architect of this destruction, passing for 412 yards and 4 TDs. He completed 24 out of 29 passes.
4, blocked there by Zylstra. It's caught by Jameson Williams. There he goes. Foot race with Miller. Foot race with Savage. That